Hi, it's Matthew Gooley, and I'm sure this movie can't be made in time, but I've had a great idea for a fourth and final Back to the Future movie. And final, I'll explain in a minute, you'll understand why it's final. Basically, it starts, there's a bunch of crazy things happening. Everyone thinks that the world is ending, and there's natural disasters no one can explain, and buildings, people are seeing buildings that weren't there for hundreds of years that are showing up and then disappearing, and people just are really preparing for the end of the world. And the trailer would start where you'd hear news reports talking about these events, and then you'd hear, the faint Back to the Future theme. Kind of depressing and ominous sounding. And then you wouldn't even know it's Back to the Future trailer yet, but then you'd see Marty McFly at his home watching the news, and then you'd see Doc Brown, and he's stressing and pacing, and he's starting to have a theory. So he contacts his old friend Marty McFly, who he hasn't seen very often, but they've kept in touch, and he decides that they need to go using the new time machine from the third movie. They have the locomotive engine that's now a time machine, and he tells Marty that we need to go back, and he's like, where Doc? Back to the future? And he's like, no, to the past. And we've already been to the future. We're in the future. This is the future. And they basically travel back to the 50s and back to the 80s, and then they go to the alternate future, which is the present, because it's 2015, which is the furthest they ever traveled. And he didn't realize that they were actually damaging the space-time continuum and the temporal fabric, because you can travel to the past, through the time, because it's already happened, but if you go to the future, it hasn't happened yet, so how can you go there? And so it actually is forcing things to happen that haven't, and it damaged something that's going to cause the world as we know it, or time, to just end. And they go back, and they think they finally have figured it out after going back a few times and making sure that Biff doesn't interfere and things happen to prevent them from happening that happened in the other movies. And they go back to the present, which is the future, and they think it's fixed. They think everything is fine, and they realize that nothing was fixed. It's exactly the same, and there's actually a countdown, and the world's going to end. And so Doc Brown, without Marty McFly, he actually travels on his own. He realizes what he needs to do. Can you think about what he needs to do? Did you figure it out yet? He travels back to 1955 when he originally invented the time machine. He sneaks into his own house and he prevents himself from slipping, ultimately preventing the time travel from ever happening, preventing himself from developing the time machine in this flux capacitor. So nothing ever happened, and thus time will not be damaged, the world will not end. And the final Back to the Future movie. Do you think we have time to make this?